Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Tennessee Japan Forum Perspectives on Resilience and Revival, the Future of Japan, U.S. Relations, and Expanding Tennessee's Reach. I'm Bob Booker, Japan American Society of Tennessee Board Chair and Senior Manager Corporate Services with Denso Manufacturing Tennessee Incorporated. As your host today, I thank you for joining this afternoon. Before the introduction of our first guest speaker, I would like to acknowledge the tremendous support of the National Association of Japan American Societies, otherwise known as NAJAS, in underwriting today's meeting. JAS's first ever virtual annual meeting is part of the Japan Currents National Series and is presented in partnership with the National Association of Japan American Societies and the Embassy of Japan. Additionally, in the spirit of gratitude, we thank our members and sustainers whose collective financial support fuels JAS's mission to strengthen a vibrant bilateral economic future for Tennessee and Japan. Of particular note are the sustaining partnership of the State of Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development and longstanding commitments of Chairman's Roundtable members Bridgestone, Americas Incorporated, and Brother Industries USA Incorporated, and Managing Director members Baker Donaldson, BB&T, now Truist, B&A Nashville International Airport, Denso Manufacturing Tennessee Incorporated, Komatsu America Corporation, Mitsui and Company USA Incorporated, and Nissan. Each of these members also support JAS by providing representatives to its board of directors. We gratefully acknowledge as a group the 23 individuals from across the state who represent Japan-connected communities throughout and volunteer service to JAST. Finally, we express gratitude to each JAST member for your annual contributions, both financial and in kind, which are the lifeblood of JAST. We ask for your help and support once again as our membership renewal campaign is already underway for 2021. Every member is important to us, and your involvement is instrumental in keeping Tennessee-Japan partnerships front and center now and in the future. Since its inception as a 501c3 in the year 2000, JAST has grown steadily to become the organization it is today. It has taken a lot of hard work and dedication and the generosity of a multitude of members, supporters, and board members over the years. In celebrating JAS's 20th anniversary last year, we had ample opportunity to reflect on the legacy of those who have shaped our society. The result is a new digital edition entitled the Jast Retrospective Celebrating 20 Years of Service. I invite each of you to view it on our newly redesigned website as it effectively communicates what JAST ultimately is all about, and that is expanding and celebrating the important relationships between Japan and Tennessee. Gathering today from our respective outposts for our first ever virtual JAST annual meeting, our title theme speaks of resilience and revival. We recognize fully the strength in the face of adversity comes from two-way collaboration and mutual cooperation. Present conditions, including devastating losses and innumerable challenges, face each day amid a lingering COVID-19 pandemic, do not diminish the unfathomable devastation and seemingly insurmountable challenges that our friends in Japan faced a decade ago as the great Tohoku earthquake challenged life as they once knew it forever. To speak to the very heart of these matters, I am extremely honored to introduce an exemplary leader who has most graciously agreed to serve as Jast's honorary co-chair. Consul-General of Japan, Ms. Kayoko Fukushima, representing the Consulate-General of Japan in Nashville. Consul-General Fukushima assumed her post in December 2019, making her third diplomatic assignment in the United States. She received a Master of Law in Diplomacy at the Fletcher School of Tufts University in 1985 and served at the Consulate General of Japan in New York. Consul General Fukushima has extensive experience working with the United Nations, having served as program officer at the United Nations University from 2003 through 2006, and as the founding director of the UN Women Japan Liaison Office, both based in Tokyo. Consul General Fukushima joined Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1981 after receiving a Bachelor of English Literature from Sophia University. She has held a variety of posts in Tokyo, most recently serving as the Director of Diplomatic Archives. Prior to that, she had several posts in the Ministry Secretariat, including as Senior Coordinator of the Public Policy Strategy Division, as well as Assistant Chief of Protocol. She has also served as the embassies of Japan in Ireland and Thailand. Consul General Fukushima is married with 2 daughters. Please welcome Consul General Fukushima for opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Booker, for the kind introduction. Governor Lee, Senator Hagerty, Mr. Booker, Mr. Kelley, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to attend this year's Tennessee Japan Forum hosted by Jast. I'm glad to see you all. I have now been Consul General of Japan in Nashville for a little over 1 year. Due to the pandemic, this certainly was not the year I expected when I spoke at this forum about a year ago. We have all faced many challenges together and have worked as a team to navigate the new way of business that arose as our way of life so drastically changed. I am proud to see the dedication to a strong Japan-US partnership that endured among those here. It was a great pleasure for me to participate in online events of Jast last year, including the Cherry Blossom Festival, Memphis Japan Festival, and Women's Leadership Forum. We are all hopeful that life can continue on with the new normal for the moment and in-person format in the near future. During this time of rapid transitions and dramatic changes, it is more important than ever to maintain strong personal and business connections. In September last year, a new cabinet was formed by Prime Minister Suga, and in January, President Biden and Vice President Harris were inaugurated. Prime Minister Suga extended his most heartfelt congratulations to President Biden and Vice President Harris on their inauguration and expressed his intent to collaborate closely with them and to reinforce the Japan-US alliance and make it even more robust. Earlier this year, telephone talks were held between Prime Minister Suga and President Biden and between Japanese Foreign Minister Motegi and Secretary of State Blinken, respectively. In these talks, both sides confirmed their commitments to strengthen the Japan-US alliance, to realize a free and open Indo-Pacific, and to cooperate closely to tackle global issues, including COVID-19 and climate change. The importance of the Japan-US alliance will continue to grow in many ways, including through our cooperation in security affairs, trade, pandemic mitigation, digitalization, disaster prevention, and climate change. In addition, grassroots exchanges will continue to play a very important role in strengthening our bond. I hope to enhance an already strong bilateral relationship in this region, and your continued cooperation with our consulate would be greatly appreciated. My colleagues and I are looking forward to working closely with you this year in every possible manner. As you may know, Japan is the #1 foreign direct investor in Tennessee, and the nearly 200 Japanese companies operating in this state employ over 500,000 Americans. Even in these challenging times, we can see how Japanese businesses are supporting their local communities. Companies such as Nissan, Denso, and Bridgestone used their facilities to support COVID-19 response, producing and donating face masks and face shields using their advanced technology. Future expansion plans were announced for Japanese businesses, reminding us that growth continues even in difficult times. We even saw new innovations and collaborations, such as Mitsubishi Motors' new 2020 Outlander SUV via Amazon Live. Over the past year, we have seen that Japanese businesses are not only able to grow with the challenging times, but are also essential partners in their local communities. Organizations like the Japan-America Society of Tennessee are an essential part of a successful Japan-Tennessee relationship. They not only help ensure that Japanese businesses feel welcome here, but also run many events which introduce American people to Japanese culture. I commend them on their work this past year, from a virtual events including Cherry Blossom Festival to a weekly informative newsletter. Jast has anticipated the needs of the Tennessean audience and risen to the occasion. I am sure we are all looking forward to seeing each other in person at the Memphis Japan Festival and next year's Nashville Cherry Blossom Festival. Currently, we at the consulate are conducting our activities mainly in virtual formats, except our consular services, which remain mostly in person. We share our activities and information about Japan through our website and social media channels. Our Facebook and Instagram showcase Japanese culture and Japan-US exchanges in the region. For example, last week in our Instagram, we posted creative dishes of the winners at our photo contest of Japanese Southern fusion cuisine. So please visit our accounts when you have time. You can reach our Instagram and Facebook accounts with the keyword Japan in Nashville. With regard to the situation concerning COVID-19 in Japan, number of new cases per day has been around 1,000 in these few weeks. In early February, due to the resurgence of the pandemic in Japan, a state of emergency was declared in 10 Japanese prefectures, including Tokyo and Osaka, with measures to mitigate the disease, including shortened business hours of restaurants in these prefectures. Recently, the situation has been improving, and a state of emergency in 6 of these 10 prefectures has been lifted. At the same time, the vaccination has begun, and the government has been striving to expedite the vaccination process. Our consulate provides consular information, including restrictions for travel from the US to Japan. So if you are interested, please visit our website to keep you updated. I hope the time we can travel freely both ways between the United States and Japan will come soon. With regard to Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Games, efforts have been made to hold them safely with various measures. Today is March 11th. 10 years ago today, the Great East Japan earthquake devastated a large region of Japan. The most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan was followed by a tsunami and nuclear power plant disaster, which together led to enormous loss of life, mass displacement, and damage of homes, businesses, and essential infrastructure. In the face of this unprecedented disaster, Japan received support from all over the world. I would like to touch on a few of the ways that Tennessee and the people of the United States demonstrated the friendship which exists between our two nations. Would you show that slide, please? Thank you. Next slide, please. Immediately after the disaster, Jast established the Tennessee Tomodachi Fund to go towards relief efforts. With a turnaround time of only a few days, the Nashville Cherry Blossom Festival was turned into a relief event, which raised money for the fund. Other local organizations, such as Tennessee Art League, held fundraising events as well. Local universities also expressed their sympathy towards Japan. Vanderbilt University held a candlelight vigil for the victims of the disaster, and Middle Tennessee State University held a fundraising effort called Genki for Japan. In all, the Tennessee Tomodachi Fund raised more than $200,000 towards the relief efforts. Next slide, please. On a nationwide level, the United States Armed Forces conducted Operation Tomodachi and dispatched tens of thousands of service members from the Navy, Maritime, Air Force, and Army. These service members delivered food, water, and other essential supplies, assisted with search and rescue operations and debris removal, and provided support for other humanitarian aid operations. In order to continue in the spirit of Tomodachi, or friendship, the Tomodachi Initiative has been created to invest in the next generation of Japanese and American readers through educational and cultural exchanges. Many programs through this initiative were designed to directly support areas and young people affected by the disaster. Next slide, please. Another way you can see this friendship in action is through friendship blossoms. In Washington, D.C. in 1912, First Lady Helen Taft and Viscountess Chinda, wife of the Japanese ambassador, planted the first of 3,020 flowering cherry trees gifted to the Washington, D.C. by the city of Tokyo. Next slide, please. In October 2012, yes, to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Japan's gift to the United States, the U.S. government sent 3,000 dogwood trees for Japan. The Tohoku region received approximately 1,000 trees. Next slide, please. Let me touch upon the story of Miss Taylor Anderson, who was a 24-year-old English teacher on JET program and tragically lost her life in the earthquake. Even in her last moments, Taylor was working hard to ensure the safety of her students. After her death, her family created the Taylor Anderson Memorial Gift Fund to support grassroots programs, including a student exchange program between the disaster-affected areas in Tohoku and the US. Her story can be seen in the film, Live Your Dream, the Taylor Anderson story. These supports by our American friends have been deeply appreciated by us, the Japanese people. 10 years later, it is inspiring to see the great progress Japan has made in reconstructing the affected areas. I would like to show you just one example of this. Next slide, please. The city of Quisennuma in Miyagi Prefecture was heavily affected by the Great East Japan earthquake, especially the seaside Naiwan district. In July 2020, this beautiful facility on your right opened. It is called Mukaeru, which means to receive in Japanese. It contains a shopping mall and public park, and also it functions as a breakwater facility. So this facility receives both guests and waves. The design of this facility, including the wave-shaped roof, keeps good harmony with the local landscape. Scenes such as this one fill us with hope for the continuing recovery for the Tohoku region of Japan. Let me also share with you the Obento project that our consulate is currently promoting using ingredients from Tohoku. Next slide, please. These are the Obentos we are promoting. Together with Zendo America, we have created Japanese lunch boxes using Wagyu beef, salmon, and rice from Tohoku region. They will be sold through this coming Sunday, March 14th. If you are interested, please visit the website, jbentobox.com. Thank you. Today, Prime Minister Suga and President Biden issued joint message on the passing of 10 years since the Great East Japan earthquake. In this joint message, both leaders expressed their deepest condolences to the families and communities who are devastated and who are still mourning such an immense tragedy. They reaffirmed the special bond and unshakable friendship in the Japan-US alliance that has been witnessed in the bilateral cooperation. In support of those affected and to honor who we lost, it is pledged that Japan and the United States will continue to move forward shoulder to shoulder as Tomodachi to finish the reconstruction of the Tohoku region and to realize a better future for us all. I'd like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank all of you who were a part of recovery efforts after the disaster. It is in the dark times such as that one when we can truly see the strength and resilience of our friendship. In closing, it is wonderful to be here and join you today. Working together, I know that we can continue to grow the Japan-Tennessee relationship in 2021 and beyond. I wish you and your families the best and hope you stay safe and healthy. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Consul-General, for your remarks, and as do I, our members and guests are grateful for your dedication and service and for your willingness to share your personal insights with us in such a generous manner. As always, we will continue to reflect on your words and our work to champion and deepen mutually beneficial relationships between Japan and Tennessee. So thank you again very much.
Thank you very much.
Leading up to today, Jast hosted 2 virtual roundtable events with a view to foster increased dialogue and facilitate stronger statewide networks on a grassroots level. Before we introduce the next segment of today's program, I would like to take a few moments to thank those who participated and to summarize the takeaways from these sessions. Of course, we invite everyone to listen for themselves, as recordings of these sessions will also be uploaded to Jast YouTube channel in the next few days. On March 4th, Japanese community leaders and representatives of Japanese-focused regional organizations in Tennessee joined host Mari Yamamoto for a discussion conducted entirely in Japanese to share their insights, experiences, and thoughts about how Tennessee communities can better support current and future Japanese companies and residents. We want to thank Ms. Kumi Alderman, representing East Tennessee, Mr. Koji Sato, representing Middle Tennessee, and Mr. Kanzi Takayama, representing West Tennessee, for their thoughtful conversation and sharing specific challenges faced by members of the Japanese community. Going forward, JAST will look forward for new avenues of support for areas of particular concern, including language barriers, setting up bank accounts, getting driver's licenses, dealing with local schools, and receiving advice on legal matters. On March 9th, representatives from 5 Tennessee sister cities organizations introduced their Japanese twins. Again, we would like to recognize and thank them for their leadership and support of innumerable initiatives to strengthen ties with Japan and their local communities. I'd like to recognize Seth Sumner, City Manager, City of Athens, Athens Friendly City Sister Cities Committee, Lee Ann Stewart, Chairperson, McVinville Makawa Sister Cities Board of Directors, Sarah Lingo, Executive Director, Sister Cities of Nashville, with Celeste Wilson and Mina Johnson, Japan Committee co-chairs. Mark Michelson, Vice Chairman, the Town of Smyrna Sister Cities Committee, and Stephanie Stevens, Board Member and Student Exchange Leader, Suru Hendersonville Friendship Committee. I invite you to explore the many meaningful exchanges and connections that these city pairs have established, grown, and sustained over so many years. From the newest of these programs to the longest running, each of the dedicated community leaders and volunteers involved with these groups, past and present, deserves our admiration and gratitude. The substance of these roundtable discussions of the last week bring to light the opportunities ahead as we strive to build upon the service of so many who have come before us. The JAST retrospective, which I referenced earlier, also reinforces this idea of standing on the shoulders of those who came before and staying true to the vision of our founders. In this next segment, Voices Preserved through JAST annual meeting archives provides context and bear witness to the timelessness of the mission. As stated last year, to strengthen a vibrant bilateral economic future for Tennessee and Japan by building upon longstanding relationships and promoting mutual understanding and cultural awareness among Japanese and American communities in Tennessee. Specifically, the video recordings will momentarily share with you the date from May of 2003, less than 2 years after the 9/11 terrorist strikes on U.S. soil exposed our nation's vulnerability in ways that most of us could never have imagined. Yet, these reassuring messages from Tennessee statesmen who each made their own indelible mark on our state's relations with Japan find relevance still as we look forward with hope bolstered by resilience of the past. Depending upon your particular connection, it is possible you may have problems with transmission of the videos. If you do have video or audio issues, please refer to the chat for the video YouTube links.
I'm Lamar Alexander, and I want to express my thanks to the U.S. Japan Society. Obviously, the most important relationship that Tennessee has had with any country in the world in the last 25 years has been with Japan. I remember in 1979 when President Carter said to me as a new governor and to all the governors, go to Japan and persuade them to come to America and make here what they sell here. At that time, Japan had made very few investments in the United States. But then Nissan came in 1980. That time we had 12 Japanese investments. Today we have 155 Japanese investments. And that comes because on a bipartisan way, with my successors in the lead, Governor McWhorter, Governor Sundquist, and now Governor Bredesen, we have presented to the Japanese, as we have to American manufacturers, a state with a right-to-work law, with a central location, and with a warm, good environment and the best road system in the country. That's helped us increase our family incomes, which were at about 80% of the national average in 1980, to about 100% of the national average by 1990. We owe Japan a lot for reminding the country of what a good place to create jobs Tennessee is. And we look forward to a bright future. It's terrific to have our Tennessean Ambassador Baker there in the tradition of Mike Mansfield, who was such a great help to us. And it's wonderful to see Nissan continue to expand, to see the new news by Toyota in Jackson, to see Nippon Denso, or Denso, and I guess as we now call it in my hometown of Maryville, continue to prosper, as well as all of the other industries that I talked about. As Tennessee takes its place as the leading state in the country for automobile parts suppliers, I expect to see significant new investment from Japan and new cultural advantages that come to our citizens from Japan over the next several years. I intend to do everything I can as a United States Senator to help make that happen.
I'm delighted to join fellow Honorary Chair Governor Phil Bredesen and the Japan-American Society of Tennessee by way of this video message to celebrate with you this historic milestone in the relationship between Japan and the United States, 150 years in the making. As two of the world's largest economies, as partners and as friends, Japan and the United States share today, as never before, common values, common interests, and common goals. Peace and prosperity are at the very heart of this vision that we share. We acknowledge and respect both countries' global responsibilities and roles as economic engines of growth. Our two countries are good friends and strong partners. Our alliance has proved strong in the face of recent challenges. In these perilous times, the partnership between our two countries is more important than ever. I'm pleased to say that the government of Japan has been one of our staunchest allies in the struggle against terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. In diplomacy, information sharing, attacking terrorist financing, and the rear area support of the Maritime Self-Defense Forces, Japan has been front and center in rising to the challenge of this moment. My friends, I am by nature an optimist, and while I'm fully aware that we live in uncertain and dangerous times, I also know that free peoples, by joining together, can overcome the most daunting of our challenges. History has made the United States and Japan the world's two richest and most influential nations at this time of great peril and of great promise. It is our unsinkable obligation to accept the calling of history and work together as partners and as friends and lead the world toward our common vision of liberty, peace, and prosperity. We can take satisfaction from our efforts on the economic front. We've come a long way. No one should doubt that a robust Japanese economy is a critical priority of the United States. Our own state of Tennessee is testament to this fact. When Japan prospers, the United States prospers. And furthermore, a healthy, vibrant Japan is a Japan that is able to take its proper place on the world stage, a critical factor in the security of the region and of the world as a whole. I commend you for doing your part in your own backyards, your own communities, and your own state, one relationship at a time. Your membership support of the Japan-American Society of Tennessee is an important step in the right direction as well. If you're not already a member, I urge you to join and get involved any way you possibly can. God willing, I will look forward to seeing as many of you as possible this October when the Tennessee delegation attends the annual meeting of the Southeast U.S. Japan Association in Osaka. with my very best wishes for a splendid evening and the year ahead. I thank you very much for your support for this most important of relationships.
Thank you, Peyton, for that great work with the videos. And I know each of you joined me in thinking about all the tremendous contributions made by the late Senator Baker and the contributions made by Senator Alexander. So, following quite literally in the footsteps and traditions of these former leaders, known to us as Ambassador Howard H. Baker, Jr. and Senator Lamar Alexander, is United States Senator for Tennessee, the Honorable Bill Hagerty. For most of us, Senator Hagerty is no stranger. His involvement with Jast during his tenure as Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development under Governor Bill Haslam, followed by his appointment as U.S. Ambassador to Japan, made a tremendous impact on our Japan-connected community and a number of collaborative projects. Elected to the United States Senate in 2020, Senator Bill Hagerty is currently serving his first term representing the state of Tennessee. As United States Ambassador to Japan, he represented all Americans to the world's third largest economy and America's closest ally in the region. Without further delay, a pre-recorded message from Senator Bill Hagerty.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be speaking with you today, and I do wish I could have joined you in person. I want to begin by thanking Bob Booker for his incredible leadership of JAST over the last 2 years. I also want to thank Consul-General Fukushima for her tireless efforts to foster and nurture the critical relationship between Japan and Tennessee. And of course, our Governor, Bill Lee, who I know will be addressing all of you later this afternoon and has worked so hard to keep Tennessee on the leading edge of competitiveness and economic growth, like he's also worked to continue to keep Tennessee's special relationship so in sync with Japan. Each and every one of us are here today because we understand the critical relationship between the United States and Japan. Together, we've achieved so much, and much of this would not be possible without the work and determination of JAST. As the former United States Ambassador to Japan and as Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development, I know firsthand just how crucial and productive this relationship has and will continue to be. And it's a relationship that, representing Tennessee in the United States Senate, I'm passionate about continuing to grow and develop, building upon the strong foundations of success that we've achieved over the decades thus far. From a geostrategic perspective, we all know that our nation's alliance with Japan is the cornerstone of peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. Japan is our best positioned partner to help fight back against the malign and predatory activities of Communist China. As such, one could argue that Japan is not only our strongest ally in the region, but perhaps in the world. Indeed, the largest complement of U.S. military positioned anywhere in the world is situated right there in Japan. Our friends in Japan live in a tough neighborhood where our alliance is tested daily, and it remains strong as ever. From an economic perspective, which is what we're here today to discuss, Japan appreciates the extent to which our two economies can strategically work together to create more opportunities for our citizens. This strategic cooperation has been felt firsthand by the great workers of Tennessee, and its impact spans all aspects of our economy, from the automotive industry to our energy sector and beyond. Our state has recognized the value of proactively identifying and recruiting new foreign direct investment. Today, over 53,000 Tennesseans are directly employed by Japanese-owned businesses, and Japan accounts for over $19 billion in capital investment for our state. We're proud of our ties to incredible Japanese-owned companies like Bridgestone, Denso, Mitsubishi, Nissan, and Yamaha, just to name a few. Tennessee's relationship with Japan has also withstood the test of time. Dating back to the 1970s and 80s with Sharp, Toshiba, and Nissan, who were recruited to Tennessee then by Governor Dunn and then Governor Lamar Alexander. In fact, Lamar noted during his 2 terms of governor that he spent more time in Japan than he did in Washington. Going all the way back to 1985, a New York Times article titled "Tennessee's Pitch to Japan" writes that, in these parts, the names of Japanese manufacturers are getting to be as familiar as Jack Daniels and the Grand Ole Opry. And the article further notes that Tennessee is making a name as a growing base of Japanese manufacturing. Yet the Tennessee-Japan relations transcend pure economic ties. It's also based on our shared values, our commitment to democracy, to peace, the rule of law, and free markets, not to mention a shared love of whiskey and Elvis. We see the fruits of our friendship every time we go to the annual Cherry Blossom Festival in Nashville, right in Nashville along the banks of the Cumberland River. And so it's my pleasure today to tell you all that I believe wholeheartedly in the future of our collaboration. The U.S. Japan trade deal I worked on so hard for 2 years has been executed now, and it opens the third largest market in the world after the United States and China to Tennessee farmers, and it supports much higher standards for our digital economy. I see closer linkages ahead and look forward to playing an even greater role in supporting these vital ties. I remain optimistic that Tennessee will remain a top destination for Japanese businesses and their capital. Indeed, as U.S. Senator, I intend to fight every day to make our country, and especially Tennessee, the most attractive place in the world to invest capital and grow our economy. This is the formula to bring back good-paying jobs and to strengthen our great nation in the process. This is a goal I know that all of you at Jast share, and I'm so honored to work hand in hand with you in this effort. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the strong bonds between Tennessee and Japan.
With thanks to Senator Hagerty and his team for facilitating his remarks for our meeting today, we wish him all the best throughout his first term and look forward to working with him in the days ahead. Coming up next is our much anticipated panel discussion, Expanding Our Reach, Trusted Allies in Fostering U.S.-Japan Relations. I would like to welcome Mr. Peter Kelley and our special guest panelist. Peter will moderate the segment of the program and introduce our guest panelist. Peter has been president of the National Association of Japan-American Societies in Washington, D.C. since 2009. He came to NAJAS as experienced Japan hand from prior assignments in both the private and not-for-profit sectors. From 1985 through 2003, he worked for Teradyne, Inc., a Boston-based supplier of semiconductor test equipment, spending 5 years each in Japan and Europe and establishing the company's Connection Systems division in Japan. From 2004 to 2009, he was executive director of the Harvard Yenching Institute, an independent foundation dedicated to the promotion of the humanities and higher education in Asia. With gratitude to Peter for the leadership he has brought to the network of Japan-American societies and to JAST throughout his tenure, including grant funding for today's program and moderation of this special panel, I yield the podium to him for his presentation and introduction of distinguished panel members joining us today. Peter.
Thank you, Bob. Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for your kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here at Japan-American Society of Tennessee's Japan Forum event, and to virtually see Ginger and Peyton, as well as Consul-General Fukushima, John Scanapieko, Christine Karbowiak, Lee Weiland, Masami Tyson, and others who have been so supportive of JAST over the years. My only regret is not being able to visit your beautiful city and taste some of that Japan Southern fusion cuisine that was mentioned earlier. Today is the anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake, about which Consul General spoke so eloquently a few minutes ago. We all share her sadness at the loss of life 10 years ago and her respect for the resilience with which Japanese faced such a great tragedy. I'm speaking to you as the president of the National Association of Japan-American Societies, and today we will shine some light on an extraordinary aspect of the U.S.-Japan grassroots relationship. The organizations, both public and private, which support it all across our country. First, there's the Japan-American Society Network, which I will cover. And then we will hear from two interesting organizations, the Japan Center for International Exchange and the Japan Foundation. NAJAS, or is where I work, is a network of 38 Japan-American societies. They're all private, locally funded and managed. They're located across North America. This is certainly the largest private network supporting a bilateral relationship that the United States has, with individual membership of over 10,000 total. That network, the Japan America Society Network, in total, raised over $25 million in relief and recovery funds for the earthquake and tsunami, which I just mentioned. Our oldest member was started in 1904 in Boston. In fact, 5 of the Japan America Societies were founded before 1910. These were begun in coastal cities like Boston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Portland, Oregon, by local elites who were interested in Japanese culture. In the 1920s, Chicago, Seattle, and other cities started Japan America Societies, again, before there was any real commercial interest between the United States and Japan. After the Second World War, when President Eisenhower and Prime Minister Ikeda established the security, economic, and diplomatic ties, they also emphasized the redevelopment of people-to-people relationships. And that led to the Sister City movement and a whole new set of Japan-America societies in places like Washington, D.C., Houston, Dallas, Kansas City, and St. Louis. But the largest part of NAJUS's membership, the largest number of Japan-America societies, were founded in the region of 20 to 30 years ago. And they were the result of Japanese foreign direct investment in parts of the country that didn't have a historical relationship with Japan. Japan America Society of Tennessee is one of those. Tennessee, as you saw with Senator Baker and Governor Alexander, and by the way, how nice it was to see Senator Baker on that video, an inspiration to all of us. They were very active in recruiting and supporting Japanese investment in Tennessee, and in supporting the people-to-people relationships that followed from that. Japan America Society of Tennessee has always had close relationships with Tennessee elected officials and the state government. Japan America Society of Tennessee is a model for all of the other Japan America societies in the country in that respect. And it is nice to see that continue with newly elected Senator Hagerty and Governor Lee. NAJUS, where I work, was created by our members in 1979. Our mission is to strengthen this private network of Japan America societies, and we do that by offering Japan-related programs to our members. NAJUS runs 7 program grant opportunities for our members with funding from major foundations and organizations. We have programs taking place. We have the Japan Currents series, which supports public affairs programming, including today's event. There are 14 of those events happening in Japan America societies across the country in February and March of this year, each with a locally selected theme like you're hearing here today. We also run a geostrategy in the grassroots program, which invites experts in geostrategic challenges that both Japan and the United States face in Asia. Last year, Japan America Society of Tennessee hosted that program. And this year, there are 8 of them happening in Japan America societies in these 2 months. We also offer 2 business programs, an NAJUS KKC Business Speaker Series with Kate Onren, which we invite senior executives of Japanese companies which have invested in the United States to describe their businesses and how they relate to corporate strategies. Last year, Bob Booker's company, Denso, was featured in this series, and Senator Alexander joined the event. We have a new program with the American Chamber of Commerce in Japan, which offers U.S. companies that have invested in Japan the opportunity to tell their stories. Last week, Aflac from your neighbor state of Georgia was featured, and they talked about their business, very successful business in Japan. We offer a security series called the Japan-U.S. Military Program with our partner, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation USA, in which we support the alliance by offering recognition to Americans who have served in the U.S. military in Japan, which is by far the largest number of Americans who've ever been to Japan. Finally, with support from the Japan-U.S. Friendship Commission, another organization in Washington, D.C., we offer the Richard J. Wood Art Curator Series, calling attention to the important role that art has played in the U.S.-Japan relationship. All told, NAJUS offers over 50 of these programs to our members each year, helping Japan America societies gain individual and corporate memberships, and keeping our network informed with current information about the U.S.-Japan relationship. We are very grateful to our funding partners, whose missions these programs also help fulfill. And we're pleased to be able to partner with them and with Japan America societies to bring about these programs. That's a little coverage of of the National Association of Japan American Societies. And as I mentioned, we'll now hear from two related organizations, which also help the U.S. Japan grassroots relationship. The first person I'll introduce, our first speaker, will be Jim Gannon. Jim has headed the Japan Center for International Exchange, USA, for 20 years, a policy institution that strengthens the U.S.-Japan relationship and encourages international cooperation on regional and global challenges, founded by Tadashi Yamamoto, also an inspirational figure for many of us. Before joining JCIE USA, Jim conducted research with the Japan Bank for International Cooperation, and he taught English in a rural Japanese middle school as part of the wonderful Japan Exchange and Teaching, or JET, program. Jim?
Thank you very much, Peter, and it's a real honor to be here today. As Peter said, I lead JCIE USA. I'm actually based in New York City, but we work hand in glove with our sister organization in Tokyo. And we do two things, really. One is that we organize exchanges for American and Japanese leaders. And so I was so delighted to see Senator Baker's face on the screen. Actually, he was one of the core participants in one of our earliest exchanges in 1969 when he came with a delegation of congressional members to Tokyo. And that was actually his first ever visit to Japan. And we're glad he ended up ambassador after that. But we also do these exchanges for Diet members, for journalists, policy experts, and leaders in the nonprofit and the philanthropic community. And the idea of these is to create a network that undergirds the relationship, and it can be there. People, leaders who can talk to each other when things get tough in the relationship. Second thing that we try to do is to build U.S.-Japan cooperation by leveraging these networks. And we try to use these to plant the seeds of cooperation. So recently, we've been doing a great deal of work on U.S.-Japan cooperation on global health, also on issues like how do we work together to advance democracy in Asia, and of course, U.S.-Japan cooperation on disaster response, humanitarian assistance, which is particularly meaningful and poignant today. As the Consul-General and others have said, today is the 10th anniversary of the 3/11 disaster in Japan. I think we're all even shocked now when we look at the pictures of that tsunami rolling in. And certainly the 20,000 or nearly 20,000 lives that are lost are in my mind today and in my heart, as well as the thousands of people who were affected by this and displaced, or millions actually. What I thought I would do is, when planning out how to explain what JCIE USA does, is talk about 3 projects that we did after the disaster to help respond to that. One is on working with nonprofits. A second one is really on research. And a third was how we kind of mobilized in the aftermath some politicians and policy leaders to better prepare us for the next disaster. And I think I get the sense time is running a little bit short, so I'm going to skip the third one with the politicians, but if there's time for Q&A, I'm ready to pick that up there. But on the one initiative with nonprofits, and I think a lot of the people on the call today, in March 2011, Americans wanted to help. And we were trying to find different places where we could make charitable donations to support the response in Tohoku. And it was really easy, frankly, to donate to an American organization. But it was a lot harder to go that extra mile and get that money into the hands of a Japanese organization, and then even harder to get to a Japanese organization that was working in the local community in Tohoku, which is a relatively remote region. So we had a lot of connections in the nonprofit sector. So what we did is we tried to set up a fund that we were operating where we could identify the dynamic Japanese nonprofits working on the ground where the money would make the most difference. And we thought, maybe we'd raise, $60,000 or $70,000, but things snowballed, and we ended up facilitating close to $6.7 million in charitable donations. And earlier, the Consul-General spoke about the Tennessee Tomodachi Fund that Jast created. Actually, we worked closely with Jast on this, and my understanding is Jast raised a bit over $200,000 to help out in Tohoku. And most of that money was channeled through JCIE. And we used that, mixed that with our funds, and we identified really more than 40 really innovative nonprofit organizations working on the ground in local communities in Tohoku. And then over the next 5 years, we gave the funding out to them. We didn't want to do it all up front. We wanted to concentrate on the long term. And it's really focused in three areas. One was economic revitalization, because economies were completely stalled. Second was rebuilding community ties, especially among displaced people. And the third was to try to help senior citizens who carried a special burden, and also were a higher proportion of the population in these countryside areas, as you see around Japan. And it was difficult to go there, but extraordinarily gratifying to be able to do that. Second, in terms of research, in a sense, was when we were doing this, I was blown away. It seemed that every school in the United States, almost every church, every community group was doing some sort of fundraising drive. And yet I'd open up my newspaper in the morning and I would see articles about Americans aren't giving funding. Americans aren't giving money, they're not generous, they don't care about Japan. I said, this doesn't jive. There's a real disconnect here. So what we did was we set out to look how much money Americans were actually donating for Japan. And of course, one of my ulterior motives here was if you could just demonstrate that Americans were giving a lot, this really showed how important U.S. Japan grassroots ties are, and frankly, how important the work of places like Jast are. So we went and did a survey it was over 1,300 organizations in the United States who were raising money. And what we found really blew me away. We found that Americans altogether donated $750 million. That's $750 million to help the Tohoku region's recovery. And if you step back, you place this in a historical perspective, this is actually one of the biggest disaster responses in American history. It's actually the largest disaster response for Americans ever to an overseas disaster in a rich country. It's fifth largest in American history after 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, the Indonesian tsunami in 2004 that was in poor countries, and the Haiti earthquake. I think this is a real testament to the strength of U.S.-Japan ties. So Peter, these are, just to get to your question, these are the kind of projects that we do. They're not terribly flashy, they're behind the scenes. But I think in the long run, they strengthen U.S.-Japan relations and they show the importance of the kind of ties that you see throughout Tennessee and in states around the country. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Jim, let's give you another minute or so to talk about the politicians, since we've had some local officials and elected officials. You run an important interaction between Japanese and American publicly elected officials.
Sure, I'm delighted to. And as I mentioned, we do congressional exchanges where we'll bring over people like Senator Baker, in the past to Japan, but we also do that for Diet members and bring them to the US. And so 3 years after the disaster, we did a political exchange to bring a group of Diet members, but it was a little bit different. The reason it was different was because when we were helping coordinate the disaster response, we were also trying to work with a lot of the major US humanitarian organizations, AmeriCares, Mercy Corps, groups like that, whose names you probably know. And they were raising a lot of money to help out in Japan. And of course, they wanted to help on the ground there. But a secondary motive that they had was that they wanted to work with Japanese humanitarian organizations. So the next time a disaster hit elsewhere in the world, Philippines, Thailand, then they had a partner in place they could team up with and go to. But the problem was that these humanitarian organizations in Japan had a size mismatch. So in 2011, you look at the largest humanitarian nonprofit organizations in Japan, places like Peace Winds, they had maybe 20 staff, an annual budget of $3 million. You take a place like Mercy Corps in the United States, that has staff, more than 5,000 staff, annual budget of more than $500 million. So it's like you're trying to get an elephant and a mouse to cooperate together. And you do that, somebody's going to get hurt all the time. And so the issue, if we were going to do after the 2011 earthquake, if American and Japanese nonprofits were really going to cooperate, Japanese nonprofits had to increase their capacity. So I said we bring the Diet members over to the US often. We brought a group of Diet members who was a little bit different. We also brought 4 of the key nonprofit leaders, NGO leaders in Japan, who usually never travel with Diet members, had them travel together, had them meet with White House officials, US congressional members, disaster response experts. And the idea was to discuss US-Japan cooperation on disaster relief, but really part of it was also to have them talk about how they strengthen Japanese NGOs so you could have real U.S.-Japan cooperation. They got through this dialogue, they had all fired up, went back to Japan, and sort of three results came out of this. The NGO participants there got their other colleagues in the sector together. They launched a commission to reform the NGO sector, so it was sort of self-policing. Second was the Diet members teamed up, they gathered 15 or 20 of their colleagues, and they created a legislative caucus to look at how do you do legislation to help strengthen NGOs in Japan. And then the third one was the Diet members and others pushed through regulatory reform. And the reform was in Japan, when a humanitarian organization is responding elsewhere in the world, the funding for that usually comes from the government. And it's the same thing in the United States. But none of that funding can be used to support, headquarters, operations, accounting, et cetera. So the Japanese NGOs tend to stay small and they can't build up their institutional capacity. And so they pushed through this reform to actually allow Japanese NGOs take, 5% of a grant. Sounds like a little bit. In 5 years, though, that's been $20 million that they've gained, and they've managed to strengthen themselves, grow their size. Now they can collaborate better with U.S. organizations.
Great. Well, thanks for that, Jim. The JCIE then is an example of a private foundation which has offices in both Japan and the United States that has taken on not only global challenges such as health, but also mobilized to help Japan-America societies and many other organizations provide real help to at the time of the disaster 10 years ago. We'll now shift to a public sector organization, the Japan Foundation, which is a government-run organization from Japan that works to help the U.S.-Japan grassroots relationship in the United States. And our speaker is Masaya Shimoyama. Shimoyama-san is the Director General of the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership in New York. He's been with the foundation for 30 years, including some very interesting assignments outside of Japan and the United States. He was the Deputy Director of the Japan Foundation's Jakarta office in Indonesia, also the Deputy Director of the Kuala Lumpur office in Malaysia, and the Managing Director of the Asia Center in Tokyo, and then the Secretariat for Japonism 2018 in Paris. This is his first time in the United States. Shimoyama-san arrived in September. Welcome to the United States, belatedly. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Peter. So may I start?
Please.
Yeah. So thank you, Peter, and then hello everyone. I'm Masaya Shimoyama. Thank you for having me here today. Just now, as Mr. Book explained, this Japan-America Society of Tennessee has a very wonderful mission. I quote, to strengthen a vibrant bilateral economic future for Tennessee and Japan, and by building upon long-standing relationship and promoting mutual understanding and cultural awareness among Japanese and American communities in Tennessee, unquote. Since our organization, Japan Foundation, share a common mission, I'd like to introduce the history of the Japan Foundation briefly and talk about the importance of this concept. In October 1972, the Japanese government established the Japan Foundation to comprehensively promote international cultural exchange in various fields around the world. The previous year, the so-called Nixon shock greatly shook political and economic relations between Japan and the United States. The leader of the Japanese government at the time believed that one of the reasons for this unforeseen incidents was the communication gap sort of between our two countries. As a result, in Washington, D.C. in September 1971, then Foreign Minister Fukuda said that it was necessary to expand people-to-people and cultural exchange between our two countries, leading to the ultimate establishment of the Japan Foundation. While the Japan Foundation carries out many exchange programs with countries around the globe, we prioritize our U.S. Japan exchange programs. So in 1991, Center for Global Partnership, so-called CGP, was created within the foundation to further expand these exchange programs as a response to trade frictions of the late 1980s. During this period, 1980s, Americans became very wary and distrustful of Japan. It was under these strained circumstances in 1990 that Special Ambassador Shintaro Abe, the father of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, spoke in Washington, D.C. and said that the United States and Japan are partners that share great responsibilities on global issues, and that the fundamentals of mutual trust built over many years should not be undermined by economic issues. He proposed the establishment of a new organization with the aim to greatly increase intercultural exchange between the US and Japan and further deepen mutual understanding. Thus, a new fund of 50 billion yen, or around $460 million today, was allocated to the Japan Foundation to establish CGP. Of course, cultural exchange efforts are not quick cures for solving complex economic and diplomatic problems. However, looking back on history, recognizing the importance for the people of both countries to know each other's culture and deepen mutual understanding in order to maintain and develop good relations between our two countries, including economic relations, was shared by many people. And as the Japan-American Society of Tennessee has done, as just one example, the efforts that many people have built over time in various places in the United States and Japan are now assets from which we all can draw. Time is running short, so I won't go into details, but simply we'll say that CGP is dedicated to both strengthening the global US-Japan partnership and cultivating the next generation of public intellectuals and the leaders necessary to sustain this partnership on various levels and through a variety of funding opportunities. If you are interested in knowing more about our activities and support programs, please visit our website and please sign up for our newsletters that we publish regularly with programming and event information. Please Google the Japan Foundation New York or CGP New York. Allow me to close by saying that one of my greatest dreams before coming to the United States was to listen to the blues and the southern rock while enjoying a nice tall whiskey. Unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity to visit Tennessee quite yet, but one day, I hope to visit the inspirational place where not only Aretha Franklin and Tina Turner were born, but also the legendary Elvis Presley was produced. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shimoyama-san. I think everyone in Tennessee will appreciate your tribute at the end. The Japan Foundation has played such an important role in helping Japan-America societies. In particular, the Japan Foundation has provided capacity funding for many Japan-America societies over the years. And it's rare that foundations these days offer funding that help societies retain or hire staff And that has played a huge role over the years, but in particular in the last year where the Japan Foundation reached in to help during the pandemic when many of the societies were having difficulty sustaining their staff. We appreciate that very much. This is the 30th anniversary of the Japan Foundation's Center for Global Partnership.
Oh, yes.
And we are very, we wish you 30 more years, but we are very grateful for the efforts that the Japan Foundation has made and continues to make. I'm going to be handing it back to Bob Booker in a minute, but let us all together agree that the cherry blossoms will bloom again, and next year we shall meet in Nashville, and we'll help Shimoyama-san achieve his goal. We'll taste some of that fusion cuisine and welcome back a more normal life. We hope this has been a helpful panel for you to understand all these different organizations, private and public, that help the U.S.-Japan grassroots relationship. Any questions, please feel free to contact any of us. Bob, back to you.
Yes. Peter, if it's okay, I wanted to ask a quick question about, I remember
Sure.
about the 80s and some of the trade issues at that time. And I'd like to hear a little bit more information, if it's okay, about the change in the relationship between the 80s and now, and what your panel members see as what was really the turning point to improve the relationship.
Sure. If we have time for the questions, I'd be happy to ask Jim and Shimoyama-san that. Let's start with Shimoyama-san, if you can rejoin us for a minute. You mentioned that the founding of the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership really came out of the 1980s, the difficulty in the trade relationship between the United States and Japan. How do you feel that's changed?
How do you feel? I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Bob asked about the progress in the relationship between the United States and Japan since the trade difficulties, and let me take a shot on it myself, and then we can ask Jim and Shimoyama-san to answer. There were, coming out of that difficult time in the United States and Japan relationship, there were a whole series of efforts that were undertaken, both by Japanese companies and also by many organizations that sprang up, recognizing that the trade issue was not going to go away soon, but that people needed to work on the U.S.-Japan relationship while negotiations were taking place. One of the things that happened is Japanese companies made a concerted effort to invest in the United States. And you certainly see that all over in Tennessee, as Governor Alexander mentioned, but also in neighboring states like Kentucky and Alabama, all of which now have substantial Japanese employment. The second thing that happened was there were a number of efforts taken at the grassroots level to help develop the relationship just at the grassroots level, people-to-people level. One of those is the Japan-America Grassroots Summits, which have continued every year since 1992. And the other one was the Japan Foundation saying, let's set up the Center for Global Partnership, where we can reach out to parts of the United States at the people-to-people level and offer grants to work slowly but surely to develop that relationship. So I think that's one answer, Bob, to the question you asked. Maybe Jim, do you have a thought on that? And then we can.
I do. What comes to mind, and this predates me. I was a young child at the time, but I've seen the videotape in 1981. You had American congressional members lining up on Capitol Hill with sledgehammers to smash Toshiba radios. And then I come back to 2011, what we saw in Tennessee, what we saw around the country. It was actually, I said there were $750 million in American donations raised. We counted up, there were tens and tens of thousands of American groups raising funding to help in Japan. And the reason people weren't doing this was because they felt pity for Japan, is because they had a personal connection. They had a brother or sister who lived there. They had traveled there on the JET program. They had gone in exchange with the Japan America Societies. They had hosted a student in their home. So it was this personal tie. It wasn't about this happened to Japan. It's this happened to somebody in our family. And I think that's a remarkable transformation in 3 decades. So I would say that, Peter.
I think that's, I agree with that. The Japan Foundation, one of the programs that the Japan Foundations began is a program called the Joy Coordinators. And joy means helping the Japan America Society and other parts of the country with young Japanese who come over and spend a year in parts of the country that they don't really know and help out existing organizations with the U.S. Japan relationship, such as visiting schools and so forth. And for that, we have to thank the Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership. I see on our screen that we are joined by Governor Lee. So let me hand the baton back to Bob Booker for the introduction.
Thank you very much, Jim, Peter, and Shimoyama-san, to have this opportunity for you to share in greater detail the breadth and importance of your work to Jast audience is very gratifying. We hope that in a small way, today's session has increased awareness about the many opportunities created for grassroots and scholarly exchange between the U.S. and Japan through your respective organizations. So we truly appreciate you joining. We now turn to our final speaker this afternoon, Jast Honorary Co-Chair, Governor Bill Lee, who has graciously carved out time and what we know is a very busy schedule to present closing remarks. His presence with us today signifies the highest degree possible of the importance of Tennessee's relationship with Japan. As time is growing short, I intentionally keeping his introduction very brief, but for those who may be less familiar with his life before election as Tennessee's 50th governor in 2018, I've chosen just a few highlights to share with you. Under his leadership, Tennessee has been recognized by independent national sources with a number of best, including the #1 best physically managed state in the country, the best business climate in the U.S., #1 in the nation for advanced industry job growth, and the best state for small business growth. So that's amazing for advanced industry growth and small business growth. Tennessee is excelling under his leadership. A 7th generation Tennessean, Governor Lee was raised in Franklin in the mid-state, where he and his wife Maria still reside today on the family's farm. After graduating with a degree in mechanical engineering from Alabama-based Auburn University, he joined the family business that his grandfather started in 1944. In 1992, he was named president of Lee Company, a comprehensive mechanical construction service company. Please welcome Honorary Co-Chair of Jast, Governor of the great state of Tennessee, the Honorable Bill Lee.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate you having me on. Thank you for that introduction. And I'm certainly honored to be here today. Thank you, all of you that are attending. I know there are a number of you. I'm proud to be here. And I'm proud to be here along with my coworker, Masami Tyson, who is the Global Director of Foreign Direct Investment for the state of Tennessee in our Economic and Community Development Group. We have been together in Japan as I traveled there in 2019, shortly after I became the governor. It was the first international trip that I took, and in part because of the incredible relationship that this state has built with Japanese companies and Japanese people over the many decades. So we are the #1 state in the country for foreign direct investment and job creation. More companies are investing and bringing jobs, creating jobs, frankly, in our state than any other state in the country. We're very proud of that. We have tried to create a business-friendly environment, particularly for those from other countries who are interested in investing here. But certainly Japan is the #1 foreign direct investment partner that we have in this state with about 200 Japanese-based companies that employ some 53,000 people in our state and have invested $20 billion in Tennessee. So the partnerships from an economic standpoint and a business standpoint are remarkable, frankly. It's very interesting to me because before I became governor back in the 80s, really, primarily the business I was in was mechanical contracting. So there was a time in Tennessee that many of you on this call would be familiar with when Japanese investment really began to take off in this state. And there are dozens of manufacturing companies across Tennessee that are Japanese-owned businesses that came to provide support for some of the larger industries that came here first. And so I have a long history of working with Japanese companies in my private sector life back in the 80s. And to find myself in the position that I'm in now to really to welcome more investment, to welcome that partnership from the level of being the governor, and the appreciation that now I have for the 50,000 jobs and I tell people all the time, when you create a job, it's more than a job, you're changing a life. And the investment of these companies in this state and the creation of these tens of thousands of jobs has made a significant change in the life of our state. So we are tremendously grateful for that. We are very hopeful for the environment ahead. You know, we are aware and certainly cognizant of, and it's been spoken, I think earlier in your talk, there's been a number of references to the earthquake and tsunami and from 10 years ago and the tremendous amount of death and loss and tragedy that occurred in Japan. I was just listening to the last speaker talk about how Americans felt that, Tennesseans in particular, how we felt that in a different way than we would have otherwise because of the relationships that all of us here have in some way or another with someone connected to that beautiful country. And so we felt it differently than we would have, but it's been that certainly was a tragic and a difficult time, but it's also a story of rebuilding and redemption and hope. And I believe that that's a little bit of where we are right now in this country with this global pandemic, really in the world, with this global pandemic seeming to begin to move in a different direction and beginning to round the corner. We have so much opportunity. I do think redemption is a good word to use, taking the real difficulties that have been our experience, whatever they are in our lives, and using them for hopeful good. And so our economy is strong, our relationships are strong. Those of us that are on this call and that are a part of this community of relationship here, it's strong. We are very hopeful for where it is headed in the future. And I just want to say thank you for the partnership that does exist and for that expansion of that and for my desire to go back and travel again and meet more of the leaders who have decided to partner with this state, such an incredible part of what has made this state such an attractive place for business. So thank you for having me on. Thank you for the opportunity to wrap up your session. Most importantly, for those of you who have been a part of making a decision or keeping an investment in this state, be it people, be it cultural, be it a company, you enrich our lives, you enrich this state, you enrich the economy of this state, and therefore you are a part of making life better for the people that live here. And that is my job, is to wake up and spend my life thinking about how to make life better for the people that live in our great state. And you help me accomplish that. So thank you very much.
Governor Lee, thank you so much for being with us today. We know you have a very busy schedule, so we truly appreciate it. And Masami-san, it's good to see you also. And both of you, please know that Jast is here for you as we look forward to that very bright future you just mentioned for both Japan and the state of Tennessee. So thank you both very much. In closing, I offer thanks once again to Consul-General Fukushima, Senator Bill Hagerty, Peter Kelley, Jim Gannon, and Shimoyama-san, and the National Association of Japan American Societies for the Japan Current Series Program Grant. And thanks to all of you for taking this time to join us today, and for all that you do to keep our community connections with Japan strong and vibrant. Going forward, please stay tuned to our website, follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, and look for our weekly news digest, monthly newsletters, and e-blast about Jast programs, festivals, networking events, and programs coming up later this year. We're excited to announce today that the Mitsui USA Foundation will fund the Mitsui USA Foundation Scholars Program in Tennessee for the 18th year. In addition, continuing their generous support of Jast programming, the Mitsui USA Foundation will also fund a new Mitsui lecture series scheduled to launch this summer, as well as provide regional outreach sponsorships to support Jast activities across the state. We are hopeful that with this kind of support in combination with others, we will be able to return to delivering opportunities for in-person business networking as soon as conditions permit. Of course, we can't do it without you. So until then, be well and stay safe. And also with thanks to a terrific Jast team working behind the scenes, and to all of you for your continued support and our work together, the 2021 Tennessee Japan Forum is hereby adjourned. Thank you again, and please have a good evening.